The three U's. The first one is that of the ideal self. The ideal self is essentially the mask that you put on to cover up the hurt and the pain and the suffering and the feelings of not enoughness, and to attempt to cover that eternity-sized hole in your heart. This is typically comprised of 3 points in your childhood in which you put on a mask in order to please either yourself according to what you thought you should be, or others according to what they thought you should be. In my case, one of the big masks, or a few of the masks that I put on to be able to cover up those feelings of inadequacy deep within, were that of genius. Because with genius, there was a time in my life whenever the only attention I could get was whenever I was getting good grades or I was getting in trouble. So it became very apparent to me that if I started learning, and if I could know more, and if I could be more in that way, then maybe I would be enough. Maybe I would get that attention that I was seeking so eagerly. The other one being apathetic slacker. So at a certain point in my life, it was apparent to me that feeling the world around me so very deeply and feeling other people's pain and being so empathetic, it was not healthy. And so I started to put on that mask of, I don't care, it doesn't matter. I reject you before you can reject me. That was another survival mechanism that came to be. Ultimately, those were covering up, at the very core level, the feeling of not being in control. For the genius mask, was covering up that feeling at the core of not being able to be in control of my environment, of not being enough, not being worthy of love, not being worthy of attention. That was one of the ways that I was attempting to cover up that husk, right? The empathetic slacker was essentially to cover up the empathy, the deep level of empathy that I had been feeling for the people around me, to the point where I had even convinced myself that I was numb to it, that I could numb myself to it, that I could just, it became apparent that I could flick that switch at will if I so chose, until that switch got stuck. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. The husk of the real you is, at the center of that is the true you, the true identity, the child of God identity, the one that once an individual makes that decision and truly accepts Christ as the king of their heart, the one who at that point has Christ within them and is it within Christ. And simultaneously, since Christ is within the Father and the Father is within Christ, that makes you a component of the Trinity by the grace of God, by the grace of Christ, through Christ, that makes you a component of the Holy Trinity. Regarding the ideal self, there's a sort of an unholy trinity that gets formulated from the different types of masks that we as human beings put on to appease the people around us. From those 3 times in our lives, whenever we saw that we needed to add this to our repertoire to be able to survive, it's essentially the survival identity, or survival identities, which covers up those feelings of inadequacy and not enoughness and not loved in the real self. The feelings that are hiding underneath, the husk that the masks of the ideal self go on top of. And then at the center of the real self, the true core of it all, is that innocent, perfect, pure child of God. That is that divine spark of infinite, unconditional love. Thank you. The 3 U's.